On June 19, 1944, nearly 400 Japanese planes rose into the Pacific sky. By nightfall, almost none would return. It was the day the Zero's legend ended and the Hellcats began. This wasn't just another clash in the Pacific. It was a turning point, a single day of combat that rewrote the rules of air warfare forever. Only 3 years earlier, the story was very different. In 1941, Japanese aircraft carved their legend in fire across the Pacific. At Pearl Harbor in the Philippines over the Coral Sea, their Zero fighter reigned supreme. It was sleek, fast, impossibly agile, and for a time it seemed untouchable. American pilots called it a phantom, a machine that could outturn, outclimb, and outrun nearly everything in the sky. Against it, America's early fighters struggled. Many who faced the Zero never came home, and its name became a symbol of Japanese air superiority. For the United States, those early months were brutal. Pilots climbed into the stubby Wildcat, a fighter that could barely keep pace with the Zero. It was rugged but underpowered. You couldn't outturn a Zero. You couldn't climb with it. The only hope was to dive, fire, and pray you escaped. Losses mounted, machines destroyed, men gone before they had even mastered the sky. The lesson was clear. Courage alone would not win the Pacific. America needed more than bravery. It needed a weapon built to survive and to kill. By mid-1942, engineers at Grumman were already sketching that answer. They listened to pilots who had faced the Zero and lived to tell the tale. Every weakness was recorded, every strength studied. The result was not a dancer but a brawler, the F6F Hellcat. Heavier, tougher, armed with .650 caliber machine guns wrapped in armor and powered by a roaring Pratt & Whitney engine. Unlike the fragile Zero, it could take punishment and keep flying. Unlike the Wildcat, it had speed, climb, and bite. In the hands of a rookie, it was forgiving. In the hands of a veteran, it was lethal. America finally had its sword. But machines alone don't win wars. Behind every Hellcat stood the weight of American industry. While Japan struggled to replace even a few dozen planes each month, U.S. factories rolled out thousands. While Japanese cadets were rushed into battle with barely 50 hours in the cockpit, American trainees graduated with hundreds, seasoned before they ever saw combat. The math was merciless. By 1944, the Zero was no longer the hunter. It was becoming the hunted. The Pacific skies were shifting, and the stage for a reckoning was set. In the summer of 1944, the focus turned to the Marianas, tiny islands but priceless in strategic value. Whoever held them could strike directly at Japan itself. To seize them, America unleashed Task Force 58. 15 carriers, 7 battleships, dozens of cruisers and destroyers, and nearly 1,000 aircraft, most of them Hellcats. Facing them was Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa with 9 carriers and 400 aircraft, a mix of veterans and boys barely out of training. For one side, it was a force built on experience, numbers, and machines designed to dominate. For the other, it was a desperate gamble, carried on fragile planes and fading myths. On the night of June 18th, the carriers moved into position. The air smelled of fuel and salt spray, the decks alive with motion as men checked and rechecked their machines. Pilots walked the steel, silent in thought, their fighters waiting under the dim glow of deck lights. For them, this was not 1942 anymore. They carried better planes, better training, and a quiet certainty that tomorrow would be different. As dawn broke on June 19th, the Pacific sky seemed to tremble with anticipation. Engines coughed to life, radar screens lit with approaching contacts, and every man knew history was about to fracture. At 8:30 that morning, radar picked up the first wave, more than 80 enemy aircraft sweeping in from the west. Fighters, dive bombers, torpedo planes, a storm rising across the horizon. The order went out, launch all fighters. One by one, the Hellcats thundered down the decks, leaping into the sky. From above, they saw the enemy formations spreading out beneath them, sunlight glinting off crimson circles painted on fragile wings. Veterans flew among them, but many were boys, fresh from rushed training, unprepared for what awaited. The sky tensed like a drawn bowstring, and then with a dive the battle began. The Hellcats dropped from the sun like hawks. Tracers ripped the morning sky, 6 heavy guns spitting fire into fragile Zero frames. One after another, Japanese aircraft exploded into smoke and flame, their formations torn apart in seconds. Pilots who tried to twist into turning fights found themselves outmatched. The Hellcat climbed higher, dove faster, and absorbed punishment that would have turned their planes into fireballs. Within minutes, the first wave was in ruins. Bombers plunged into the sea before ever reaching the fleet. Torpedo planes shattered under relentless fire. By 10:30, the Pacific below churned with wreckage, the sky littered with falling shadows. The hunters of 1941 had become the hunted. No sooner had the first wave been broken than radar lit up again. A second formation, even larger, more than 100 strong, surging toward the fleet. The Hellcats climbed once more, engines howling as they rose to meet the threat. Across 30 miles of open sky, two forces collided. Japanese squadrons tried to hold their discipline, veterans shielding the younger pilots, but the storm was too great. The Americans slashed through their ranks, striking hard, climbing away, then diving again. Dive bombers erupted mid-air, torpedo planes disintegrated before they could even aim, and the Zero, once the terror of the Pacific, could do little but die in desperate spirals. The massacre had only just begun. By midday, the battle had become a rhythm of annihilation. A third wave appeared. Nearly 80 more planes, but they fared no better. Many were flown by boys barely out of training, some with fewer than 50 hours in the cockpit. They flew bravely, but the result was the same. Formations shattered, machines burning, the sea below littered with wreckage. By early afternoon, a fourth wave rose, smaller, desperate, scraping together obsolete models, and even trainers pressed into combat. They too were cut down before reaching the fleet. The Pacific sky, once filled with crimson suns, was now streaked with smoke and fire. What had begun as Japan's great strike had become its funeral. And then at last silence. The horizon that had once boiled with black swarms now lay empty. Only smoke hung in the air, drifting over an ocean littered with burning fuel and shattered wings. Life rafts bobbed among the wreckage, survivors clinging to a battle already lost. By mid-afternoon, the count was staggering. Nearly 400 Japanese aircraft destroyed in a single day. American losses. Fewer than 30. The kill ratio was so lopsided it seemed unreal, a blow from which Japan's naval air arm would never recover. The myth of the Zero, the invincible terror of Pearl Harbor and the Coral Sea, had died in the skies of the Marianas. As the Hellcats returned to their decks, the mood was strange, a mix of triumph and exhaustion. Pilots climbed from cockpits with shaking hands, some grinning, others silent, all of them alive against impossible odds. In the mess that night, laughter and stories filled the air, yet beneath the noise lay an unspoken truth. They knew what had happened out there. Japan had not just lost planes, it had lost the veterans who carried its air war, irreplaceable men thrown into hopeless combat. For the Americans, the victory was absolute. For the Japanese, it was the breaking point, a wound from which their navy would never truly recover. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was more than a battle. It was the death of Japanese naval aviation. In one day, decades of skill and experience were erased, leaving behind only fragments that could never be rebuilt. America's advantage was no longer just in courage, but in systems, factories that poured out thousands of planes a month, training programs that graduated pilots with hundreds of hours in the cockpit, a war machine that could not be matched. From that day forward, the Pacific skies belonged to the Hellcat. The Zero's legend ended in fire. The era of American air supremacy had begun. The morning after, the carriers steamed west across a sky that was strangely quiet. No more swarms of enemy planes, no more desperate attacks, only the hum of engines and the endless Pacific. But history had shifted. From this moment on, American carriers could strike where they wished, when they wished, without fear of Japan's air arm. Saipan, Guam, Tinian, Iwo Jima, even Okinawa, all would fall under the shadow of Hellcat wings. And only months later, Tokyo itself would tremble beneath American bombers. June 19, 1944 was not just a victory. It was the beginning of the end. By the war's end, the F6F Hellcat would destroy more than 5,000 enemy aircraft, earning a kill ratio unmatched in aviation history. Yet its true legacy was not just in numbers, but in what it symbolized. The moment when courage met industry, when lessons written in blood were forged into supremacy. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot proved that the Zero's reign was over, and the future belonged to the Hellcat. But this was only one chapter in the Pacific War. More battles, more machines, and more forgotten voices still wait to be heard. Join us again as we step deeper into the shadows of history, because the past is never silent,